The tactical term of 2023 so far has been Box Midfield. It's the strategy so many top clubs are turning to, with Manchester City the shining example as they used it en route to a historic treble win. It's hardly a surprise to see Pep Guardiola at the heart of a tactical innovation. This isn't the first time he or anyone has ever used the box midfield, but it might just be the first time we've seen multiple top teams move to it. After all, City aren't the only ones at it. Arsenal have made it a core part of their strategy, while Liverpool, Barcelona and others have incorporated it too. We'll cover all of those clubs here as we ask, what is the box midfield, how does it work, and why are teams flocking to it? Then we can look at those four clubs and see how they all create their box differently. So what is the box midfield? It is, quite literally, a midfield box. It is a midfield four, but rather than line up in a flat line, as if in a classic 4-4-2 formation, it lines up in a 2-2 staggered shape, which can roughly form a box or a square on the pitch. You don't have to play a specific formation to use the box midfield, as it can be found at the heart of all sorts of different shapes. But whatever the system, the common goal is usually the same: numerical superiority in midfield. As football has evolved to become more possession-based, tactics have evolved to reflect that, and there's no better way to keep possession than to outnumber your opponent in midfield. That is, initially, why the midfield 3 became so widely used. It outnumbered a 4-4-2's midfield by one player, making keeping the ball easier because there's always a spare man. The concept of the box midfield is the exact same. 4 outnumbers 3 by 1. You're just adding an extra player in to create that spare man. There are defensive benefits to using the box too. If you use a front 3 in a box midfield, you can spread 5 players across the pitch evenly, making your defensive positioning and counter-pressing much better. In City's 3-2-4-1 shape, there's 5 attackers pressing and 2 big midfielders supporting, making it incredibly hard to play through them. So let's run through some top-level examples of the box midfield, and let's start with European champions Manchester City. The key to it is John Stones, who has had a magnificent 2023 to date. Out of possession, City looked a bit like this, with Stones tucking into the defensive line, usually at centre-back. It's pretty much a 4-2-3-1. In possession though, it morphed into a 3-2-4-1 shape, with Stones pushing into midfield, Gundogan joining the next line alongside KDB, and Rodri, strangely, shifting from right central midfield to left central midfield in order to facilitate and form the box. This shape dominated possession, piled on the goals, held the width of the pitch, counter-pressed brilliantly and held up defensively. The key to that last part is the fact the outside centre-backs, Ake and Akanji, are fast and can cover large areas and are excellent 1v1 tacklers. But here's the thing, marrying up possession and goals with defensive solidity is a big challenge, and only one other top team have managed to do this consistently. It's Barcelona. Barca's formation on paper, shown here, is a classic 4-3-3, the shape they've preached for decades, the shape that Xavi himself played in. But it shifts into a back 3, a box and a front 3, with Balde surging all the way up from left back and Gavi tucking inside to create space for him to do so. Koundé reciprocates on the other flank by tucking in from right back, while the right winger stays high and wide. They began doing this in January and the results have been fabulous. Barca recorded the highest average possession per game in La Liga, by far the fewest goals conceded, and the second most goals scored. In fact, if you consider that 7 of the 20 goals they conceded came in the final 4 games, once the title had already been secured, they conceded a ridiculously low 0.38 goals per game at peak power. Arsenal are in on this too. Arteta's using the same base 4-3-3 that Barcelona do, but instead of inverting the left winger, he inverts the left back. Alexander Zinchenko shifts into midfield and will now join Declan Rice at the base, pushing Kai Havertz and Martin Ødegaard further forward and up the pitch. Arteta loves the spacing of the 5 in attack, which helps with ball circulation and counter-pressing, but there's still some work to be done here. Arsenal scored a lot, but conceded too many. In fact, they shipped 2 or more goals in 13 different Premier League games last season. Perhaps Declan Rice will help with that. Liverpool moved to the box-shaped midfield late in the season. seeking to remedy a poor run of form through March and early April. In fact, they did it for the first time against Arsenal. Perhaps being outnumbered in midfield was firmly on Jurgen Klopp's mind. The tried and trusted 4-3-3 was no longer producing results or relentless performances. So with 10 games to go, Klopp did something that he had once criticised England manager Gareth Southgate for doing. He asked Trent Alexander-Arnold to invert into midfield. Suddenly, he looked like a world beater again, spraying passes across the pitch and racking up assists just like old times. From switching balls over to Luis Diaz to sending in brilliantly angled crosses, he was suddenly the creative fulcrum of his team once again. Here are the top assisters in the league from the point Liverpool switched to the midfield box, and lo and behold, Trent is top with 7. There is a trade-off at play here though. Ibrahima Konate's defensive role became much more complicated and much more difficult as a result, covering a huge space and swapping inside and out with Trent, but it did light a firework in Liverpool's creativity and goal scoring. So that's 4 top teams moving towards the box midfield, but amazingly, all 4 do it in slightly different ways and for slightly different reasons. Manchester City and Barcelona use it as a defensive mechanism, aiding their counter-pressing and ability to trap teams in their own third. The further away the ball is from your own goal, the less likely you are to concede. Arsenal are seeking possession and control under any circumstance, so having 4 midfielders who are good on the ball is a great way of achieving that. And Liverpool seemingly did it to spark Trent back into life, and boy did it work. But it has created some defensive alignment issues which must be ironed out before next season. Speaking of next season, don't be surprised to see more teams adopt this strategy. A likely hotspot for this will be Thomas Tuchel's Bayern Munich, as Tuchel is all about possession and control, while Unai Emery's Aston Villa sometimes create a midfield box too. Quite simply, it is a tactical term that you need to know, as it is only going to become more common.